representative of the community of NGOs Umbrella, Mr. Daniel Kaba, and our other guest, Kamil Sladek from the Center of European Policy. So enjoy this evening, and I give the word to Daniel.
Okay, thank you very much. We decided with your Dean, Monsieur Mokra, and with the rest of your colleagues that we will run it in English. Just to capitalize on the nice opportunity that there are a few international students among you, so that you can easily understand and you can also interact. And we're going to also have a discussion after the lecture, so you can pose any question as we agree on, right? But first of all, I'll try to be as brief as possible. My name is Daniel Kaba, I represent Umbrella. You might have heard about it because we are in quite a close touch with your faculty when it comes to your master thesis, connotation, internship, and so on and so forth, but we can talk about it anytime later. This lecture is part of the entire week of global education. Maybe I'm supposed to open up. Why not? Actually, I very much like this room because it cannot be opened up from outside, right? So, should we keep it closed or? Okay. Anyway, so this lecture is also part of the Global Week for Education. This year's edition is titled Soul of Society or Spirit of Society. Maybe you can keep it open for a while.
I'll do that.
No. You can stay there.
Okay,
you can just give me the eye.
Please.
A bit.
Come in. Take chair with you, please.
It's fine. We want to make interconnections and interlinkages between what's going on outside in the world when it comes to war in Ukraine, Russian aggression, when it comes to climate change, but also regarding what happened quite, many years ago, but still somehow resonates up till today. And this is going to be tonight about the wars in the former Yugoslavia and the investigation. So I would like to introduce briefly. He would introduce himself, I think, perfectly in details. Yeah.
The doorman?
Yeah. At least we would run it in a very informal setting, right? Mr. Vladimír Dzuro is a former investigator for the ICTY, which is the acronym for International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia. Before that, he spent some years with the Political Czech Republic as an investigator, also working for Interpol. Lately, as I already mentioned, he was also part of the mission UNPROFOR in former Yugoslavia, and then spending 10 years with the ICTY, the Criminal Tribunal. And after that, yeah, the topic tonight would be quite gloomy and dark, so at least we can have some little fun at the beginning. Then he spends 20 years, close to 20 years in New York, working, and I need to read it because it's difficult for me to remember, the Office of or for Internal Oversight Services, something like internal inspection of the UN. And now he's back to the Czech Republic, and apart from his other jobs, he used to give lectures, talk to the public, the students, also at other faculties and universities. So that's it, roughly. But I think it's also good to introduce you, at least partly. So we have students mainly from two, I would say, groups. One, social anthropology, right? Correct me if I'm mistaken. I hope that we are in a good room. The second is 5th grade of international law international law, right, students? Great. Yeah, and then we might have a handful of general public visiting this lecture as well. So we're gonna run it in a way 1 hour and a half of the lecture with audio, video, and then around 30 minutes of discussion. That's it. So enjoy as much as we can use this notion of enjoying. It's gonna be more about a very interesting topic for you. So over to you.
Thank you.
Pleasure having you here.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Dobrý večer. Ještě než začnu, before I start, those guys standing there, there are some chairs outside. When I start talking war crimes, I never stop. So seriously, you should take some chairs, if you can. It's a long standing, there's plenty of chairs. I just can't keep my mouth shut. You can also come here. You will be closer to each other. Listen, guys, if you want to, you can also sit here. Please come in here. I don't bite, and I will try not to spit too far.
Čiže kľudne poďte si sadnúť dopredu, kto chcete, ak chcete aj túto pred nás. Ja si myslím, že to bude ako nejak... Dúfam, že nebudete mať vylomený krst.
Sme si blíž, konečne. Yeah, closer to each other, finally. Is it all? Good. So once again, good evening. I will try not to talk too much about myself, but rather about what we did as investigators for the International War Crimes Tribunal in The Hague. It's going to be dark. It's going to be sad. War is not funny. But just to break this misery, somewhere in 2/3 my presentation, we will make a competition. I will give opportunity to 2 ladies and 2 men compete for my book. You can choose whether you want the Czech version, American version, or the comics book. If there are no volunteers, I will make somebody to volunteer. We will compete tonight, just to make it more enjoyable. Before I start, for the lawyers here, you understand this? Whatever I say, which is incorrect, it's only my responsibility. It cannot be attributed to the United Nations or to the International War Crimes Tribunal. In other words, all mistakes, I will try to avoid them, but if there are any, they are mine. It's very important because my former employer is very insisting on it. The book, it was published in the Czech Republic in 2017. This one, 2019 in the United States for the University Press. 2022 in Croatia for the Croatian Institute for History. It also has a comics, only in Czech, unfortunately. And there was a film called The Investigator, which was based on my book. And this is the end of the self-promotion. Now, the war in former Yugoslavia. I'm not going to compete with Kamil about the history. I'm going to be careful with this because, you know, he's an expert on history and I'm not. I try to summarize it so that we don't talk about the history the whole evening. But it's important. Former Yugoslavia, that we know, but you don't, because it ended in 1992, was a result of the World War II, where the rest of the Europe was liberated by Allied forces or the Soviet Union. Yugoslavia wasn't. Yugoslavia was liberated by Josip Broz Tito and his communist partisans. He became the national hero in the former Yugoslavia, later communist dictator, and he ruled the country from the end of the World War II until he died. This is only for you to see, to understand the population. It's about 23 million altogether, but the majority were Serbs, with the Croats about the size of Slovakia and the others. Now listen to me very carefully. My presentation will be one-sided. My presentation will be one-sided because I investigated war crimes committed by the Serbs on the non-Serbs in Croatia and in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It doesn't mean that the others did not commit war crimes. The brutality of the war crimes was the same on all sides of the conflict. The brutality was the same on all sides of the conflict. However, most of the war crimes committed during this particular war were committed by the Serbs on non-Serbs. There's a good reason for it, or the bad reason for it, is if you like. First, the population. Second, the Yugoslav National Army, so-called JNA, when Yugoslavia separated finally in 1992, changed the name from the JNA to VR Vojska Republiky Srpske and Vojska Republiky Srpske Krajine. So the Serbs had weapons, while the Croats and the Bosniaks had to create their own armies from the scratch. Also, the Serbs were fighting outside of their territory most of the time. They didn't fight in Serbia itself. They fought in Republika Srpska, but it was outside of the Serbia, and also in Krajinas in Croatia. That's why in this particular war they committed more crimes than the others. It doesn't make them criminal nation. I want you to understand it, and I will make sure that you understand it. From my presentation, you shouldn't leave this room thinking that the Serbs are the only bad people or some kind of criminal nation. This is not true. We understand each other. It's clear? Okay, very good. Back to Tito. Josip Broz died in 1980. He was different communist than our communists here. First, he's got a charisma. Second, he was the national hero because of the liberation. Third, he understood what PR means. At the time, he knew what the PR means. He was bringing from the West actors on his yacht to his island, to his villas across from Yugoslavia, and he could get away with about anything and everything. In my book, there's a picture at the front of it. Some of you ladies will appreciate it. You see? He could get with everything. You see where he holds the lady? This is a dictator. He just can't get away with everything. She's handing him flowers to her, and he's grabbing her by chest. And they could do nothing about it, because he was a hero and a dictator. He died. The system was not prepared for successor. As Queen sing in one of their songs, "We want to live forever." The dictators usually also want to live forever. So When he died, there was no plan for succession. 6 republics, 6 potential presidents. Everybody wants to be like Tito. Whether they loved him or hated him, they all wanted to be like him, with all the privileges that he had. So they came with a bullshit called rotating presidency. So every year there's supposed to be a president from one republic. Just imagine when you came to the university here or anywhere you start working, how long you find out where the director sits, how long you find out where the toilets. I'm making that light, but the problem here is this. This president was supposed to run the country, which was in political turmoil, for 1 year. It simply couldn't work. So there was a political crisis. They were traveling across Yugoslavia, having this session to try to figure out how to deal with this. And then, in 1899, something terrible happened. Democracy. The communism fell, the whole Europe. You know, Tito, in his years, managed to get from the West cheap money because he was seen as a better communist. He split with Stalin. Nobody else did. He did. He basically rejected the Stalin. So from the West, he was seen as a better communist. Notwithstanding that on Goli Otok in Adriatic Sea, there was a concentration camp where people were detained because they were anti-communist. He was the same dictator as any other one. But from the West, he was the better one because he didn't follow Stalin. So he got the cheap money. And on this cheap money, he built this artificial socialism in Yugoslavia. Eventually, he opened the borders, people could travel. All great. When he died, the first problem started. When the communism fell and democracy came, the second problem. There was no need for a better communist. So the money dried out. And they had the economical crisis. Something which is called hyperinflation. Among the other things. Hyperinflations, you can't imagine that. And when we had 10% of inflation here, everybody is, falling apart. 1,000% of inflation, 1,000%. They were not able to print the money with the zeros at the end. This is how fast it went. In other words, who didn't have money in Western currency, or in gold, or in some other assets, they became poor pretty much overnight. And in this, when you have a political crisis, and when you have an economical crisis, then the messiahs come in here. Those who will tell you what is the best for you. And who is responsible for that? You remember when Czechoslovakia was splitting, and it was a peaceful split. They started to point to figure who is paying for whom, and who will be better off without the other. It was much worse in the former Yugoslavia. Because I always say we Czechs and Slovaks are more interested in pretty ladies and drinking beer or wine than fighting each other. And we also, historically, we never had a war. The Balkans, there are wars pretty much repeating themselves, in the history. So these guys are the people who are the most responsible for what happened in the former Yugoslavia. I will start from Slobodan Milošević. You will often hear that he was a nationalist. I don't believe he was. He was a lawyer, he was a banker, he was a very smart man. Well, being smart and being ethical, it not always goes with each other. He realized very soon, he was a communist apparatchik, like all the others. He very quickly realized one thing. In Serbia, nationalism can take you to power and retain you in the power if you use it as a tool, as a vehicle to power. He organized on Kosovo a skirmish between the Serbs and Kosovo Albanians. And he comes there, has a political speech, I will paraphrase it now. Nobody will ever again beat Serbs on Kosovo. With that speech, he became national hero. Because the Kosovo is very similar, like for Czechs, Mountain Sheep. It's a sacred place. There's a history that comes to it, religious comes to Kosovo. For the Serbs, Kosovo is very important. And by organizing that rally there, he became a national hero. He became the president of Serbia, even though the title for that was different. He very quickly took over the media, police and secret service. He took his people there, and by doing that, he basically controlled Serbia. Franjo Tudjman, on the other hand, was typical nationalist. He wanted to create Croatia. He had a very similar what you guys in Slovakia had after the World War II. Because Croatia, as Slovakia, was part of the axis of evil, if you will, you know, the Nazi regimes, they couldn't claim it, so they wanted to create new Croatia. So this guy and these guys, big enemies, made a deal how to split Bosnia and Herzegovina on Greater Croatia and Greater Serbia. The Croats will take part of Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Herzegovinian part, where Croatians are living, actually very rich Croatians, because there's a wine and tobacco, among other things. And this guy will take the part of Bosnia and Herzegovina where Serbs are living, Republika Srpska today. This guy, nobody really wanted. I'm simplifying it. If you ask Croats, who are the Bosniaks, the Bosnian Muslims, so Croats will tell you, these are the Muslimized, if I will use that term, Croats from the Ottoman Empire. And if you ask this guy, he will tell you they are the Serbs who were Muslimized, if I use that term, during the Ottoman time. So for them, this is garbage. Right? So they wanted to split Bosnia and Herzegovina. So they came up with a plan. And the European community, it wasn't the European Union at the time, basically said no, there will be no splitting, only in the existing borders. Not that because they will be so much interested in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's a Pandora box. As soon as you start changing borders in Europe after the World War II, then you have a problem. It's a Sudetenland. Hungary can claim big part of Slovakia and part of Romania, historically. You have a Basque in Spain, whatever you look in Europe, you will have a problem with the borders. So they said no, there'll be no splitting. Which created a problem for those guys in the first place, but also when they started the nationalism in the media, they started talking about the big Croatia and big Serbia. It raised the national interest in making something different. These guys nobody wanted here. It's a reality. He was the president of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but these guys didn't want him. And I'm simplifying that, you know, for the sake of the presentation. There was a war. I will start from Slovenia. There was a 10 days war in Slovenia after Slovenia declared independence in 1991. It's a 10 days war. I'm not minimizing it. Every war is a bad thing. But only 10 days, because there was a very few Serbs living in Slovenia. Historically, right, Slovenia didn't belong to that part of the world. It was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire or Italy. So there was no real history of Slovenia belonging to Yugoslavia. So in Belgrade decided that it's okay to go. So after 10 days of negotiation, eventually Slovenia became independent. In Croatia, it was a whole different. There's a huge majority of Croats, but huge minorities of the Serbs living in this territory for generations. If you go to the coast for holidays, you usually pass Knin, the fortress of Knin, and the whole area around was heavily populated by the Serbs from the Ottoman Empire time, when they were defending Europe against the Turks. Then Eastern Slavonia, Baranja and Srem, these are on the very east side of Croatia, again heavily populated by the Serbs, about 30% against approximately 70%. There's also minorities, others, Hungarians, because historically it was also part of Hungary, Germans, Jews, and Czech and Slovaks, because Mr. Bata opened a huge Bata shoe factory in Vukovar, where a lot of Czechs and Slovaks worked. So they historically stayed there in the area. So there's a big population of the Czechs and Slovaks living in that area. Now what happened? Croats, in this new movement of the democracy, adopted new constitution. The new modern constitution of Croatia, which had one big problem for the Serbs. And the problem was they made everybody who lived on the territory of Croatia, who was not Croat, secondary citizen. They're all minorities. The Croats are only constitutional nation. For the Serbs, this was unacceptable. They became, in their own country, where they lived for 100 years, minority. So they made a rebellion. They call it Balkan Revolution, or Log Revolution. They cut the trees across the roads, and they blocked access of the Croatian authorities to those areas. And they created so-called SAOS, Srpska Autonomna Oblast, Serbian Autonomous Regions. They were outside of the control of the government. Slobodan Milošević, as I said, being smart and being not only smart, but he knew how to go about things. He started to do dehumanization. Sorry for that. You know what I mean? I just can't pronounce it now. What happened was this. He needed to scare the Serbs, to be afraid of the new Croatian government. So he started using Ustašas. Ustaša for Croat. All the media were no longer talking about the brothers, Croats and the Serbs. Because Tito, knowing what he was dealing with, he created the notion of brotherhood and unity. Bratstvo, jedinstvo. There was many things, bratstvo, jedinstvo. Even the expressway between Zagreb and Belgrade was called bratstvo, jedinstvo. But it's very difficult to shoot brothers and sisters. So they need to dehumanize it, that's the word, dehumanize it. So he started using Ustašas. Now those Ustašas who during the World War II murdered over 100,000 Croats and non-Serbs in the Jasenovac concentration camp. So the new Croatian government was all of a sudden the grandsons, if I can use that, of those Ustašas who were killing the Serbs. And they started to be very worried about it, Serbs. Croats not being too late after that, they started using Chetniks for Serbs. Chetniks, there was another gang who was killing everybody who were not Serbs during the World War II, if I may simplify it this way. So all of a sudden media will be talking now not brothers and sisters, Croats and the Serbs, Hrvati, Srbi. All of a sudden it's Ustaše and Chetnici, Ustašas and Chetniks. So it's easy to shoot on the enemies. The war broke out in Vukovar. there were some skirmishes all over the place, but the war broke out in Vukovar on 25th of August 1991, where the local Croats and local Serbs started fighting each other. The Yugoslav army was sent to the region to work as a peace force, to separate those fighting parties, if you will, to groups. The problem with that was this: how the Yugoslavia started to disintegrate. The command structure of the army was losing Croats, Slovenes, Macedonians, all the others. So the leadership of the army, being in Belgrade, became majority Serbs and Montenegrins. And during the conflict, they started siding with the Serbs against the Croats. The notion was defending the Yugoslavia, because the Croats were the terrorists who tried to break the Yugoslavia, this wonderful land where everybody was living in peace for a long time. The war was the first real war after the World War II in Europe. Bloody war. UN has to somehow react to it. So they established the International War Crimes Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in a resolution by Security Council. Something which will not happen now with the war in Ukraine, because there are five big ones in the Security Council. Those who won the World War II: United States, the UK, France, China, and Soviet Union, now Russia. They have absolutely veto power in Security Council, and Russians will not accept any resolution which will go against them. While in this time, Soviet Union was in shambles. Yeltsin was in as the president. There's tons of problems that Soviet Union and Russia had at the time. So Americans, and the spear of that was Madeleine Albright, who as a little girl was with her father in Belgrade because he was a Czechoslovak diplomat. So she fell for Yugoslavia. Germans and France passed a resolution in the Security Council about establishment of the International War Crime Tribunals, not one, ICTY for Yugoslavia and ICTR for Rwanda. I'm not going to be talking about Rwanda. The mandate for that was Great Breaches of Geneva Convention, violations of law and customs of war, genocide, and crimes against humanity. As you see, there was no mandate for invasion, for aggression. The same like ICC today cannot investigate Russia for aggression. In this, we only had this mandate. It's only. I'm saying there was no mandate for aggression. That was the resolution 827 of 25 May 1993. I will have a short video here where Madeleine Albright testified before the tribunal in a case of Bilana Plavšić. And she was asked by the prosecutor, Mark Harmon, the other guy, not this one, you will see, how the tribunal was established. And it's about 3 minutes. I think it's worth seeing it, because it will show that nobody believed it's going to work. They had to do something, politicians to do something, because there was a war in Europe, but nobody believed that it's going to work.
I'd like to turn your attention to the issue of another matter you touched on, and that is the creation of the tribunal. Could you share with the judges why the member states of the United Nations voted for the creation of a tribunal, what the concerns were, what issues it hoped to address, what goals it hoped to achieve?
Well, I think that all of the people that were involved in it, the permanent representatives in the Security Council, as well as the non-permanent ones, and others who were not on the Security Council, were very much aware that we were involved in something new, though discussing the Nuremberg precedents, that this was not a war of victors, that we were really dealing with a situation that was ongoing, that the procedures had to be established that would not only identify individual guilt and expunge the collective guilt, but make sure that proper punishment was meted out. And it was, in many ways, being present at the creation of a brand new organization. I must say that we ran into a great deal of skepticism. It was easy enough to take the first vote in February to get the tribunal created, but nobody really believed that it would work. There were questions about how the judges would be selected. I must say that especially the women permanent representatives at the United Nations wanted to make sure that there would be women judges, because so many of the crimes have been committed against women in terms of rape and horrendous crimes. And so the judges were then selected by the entire UN system. And then the question was how to get a prosecutor, and that was very complicated, and nobody thought that would happen. And then nobody thought that there'd ever be a court that actually functioned, that would be set on what the precedents were going to be. And we then in May voted on how of 93, voted on how the procedures of the tribunal would work. And then still nobody thought it would work. They said that there never would be any indictees, and then they said there would never be any trials, and then they said there would never be any convictions, and there would never be any sentencing. And at each part along the way, I would point out that they were wrong. And one of the reasons that I think it is so important that this procedure is going forward is to show that they were all wrong, that that the tribunal is very much a part of the international judicial system that is playing a very essential role, I think, in making sure that this individual guilt is assigned, that punishment is meted out, and that there can be reconciliation. I think that was the whole purpose behind having such a tribunal, so that there could ultimately be the reconciliation of the various people that were innocent as a part of this.
So nobody believed it. You know, the experience in Europe, basically the whole world experience, was with Nuremberg and Tokyo trials, the military trials in Nuremberg and Tokyo. But those were tribunals of the victors. They were after the World War II. The Allies controlled the territory, and they can basically arrest whoever they wanted. They can catch whoever they wanted. They had access to the crime sites. They had witnesses available to them. These two tribunals were put in place at a time where the war was ongoing. Our suspects were still in power. There was a completely different scenario than the Nuremberg and the Tokyo trials. Despite of they didn't believe, they hired professionals, judges, prosecutors, lawyers, defense lawyers, and the tribunal was successful eventually. As a joke, I always say, because I worked there, had to be successful, right? But the reality is, of course it's not true, the reality is it became successful because of the unique circumstances at the time. The unique circumstances was, as I mentioned, the Soviet Union didn't block it, and they hired professionals who wanted to do the job. When you look at television now, when you look at what happened in Ukraine, you see the same thing. This is not Ukraine, this is Vukovar. After 3 months of the war, this is Vukovar, a beautiful city, very fertile land. On the Danube River was turned into the ruins. The Croats call it Stalingrad of Croatia. You know what, we humankind, you know, we cannot build an expressway between Prague and Bratislava because this is still like a parking lot, but we can kill ourselves and we can destroy things. More advanced we are, better we are in destruction. That's clear as that. Look at Ukraine today. Hospitals destroyed, cultural centers destroyed, housing estates destroyed. The technology is even better than this war. The mentality behind that is the same. They didn't want to fight street by street because of the possible loss of the soldiers. And they had the equipment, they had the artillery, they had the tanks, air force. You see the Geneva Conventions? The hospital is protected under Geneva Conventions, right? So the Croats, on the roof of this hospital, out of the bed sheets, they put the Red Cross. So the Air Force sees that it's a hospital. A MiG-21 fighter jet dropped a bomb on a hospital, which went through the roof, through all the floors, and ended up in the basement on the bed of a pension of the Serbian patient. Didn't explode, luckily, because had it exploded, the whole hospital would collapse. Geneva Convention. Just imagine, it was still one country. The pilot wasn't terrorist, right? It was a highly educated member of the Air Force of Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia, in their minds, in the military minds, lasted until April the 2nd, I think, 1992, when officially Yugoslavia disintegrated after Bosnia-Herzegovina declared independence. So it is the same like if your pilots from an airfield somewhere in Slovakia get a bomber, come above Bratislava and drop the bomb on a hospital in Bratislava. This is exactly what happened there. They bombed their own hospital. Go back. Now, the Croats were not able to defend the city. About 36,000 of the Yugoslav army, plus the paramilitary units and the territorial defense on the Serbian side, about 1,800 soldiers from the Croatian side who defended the city. When Croats could no longer defend it on the 18th of November, from the 25th of August to 18th of November, the Croats surrendered. The city was legally taken over by the Yugoslav army. It's very important for the Geneva Convention. Yugoslav army took over the city. In Zagreb, they agreed between the army, Croatian government, Red Cross, and monitors from the East European community that there will be evacuation. So people in Vukovar were called to come to Vukovar hospital for evacuation. But the army was delaying it. Army was saying, it's still dangerous, we cannot do it. So they pushed it to the 19th of November. And 19th they said, it's still dangerous. So they pushed it to 20th of November in the morning. 20th November in the morning, the convoy, I will show you the video, the convoy comes to Vukovar. It's a Yugoslav army convoy with the Red Cross and the European monitors. Yugoslav army put a tank or APC across the bridge of the Vuka River and blocks the convoy. Now you will see the argument between the contra-intelligence officer of the Yugoslav army, Major Slivančanin, and Nicholas Bosinger from the Red Cross. I will talk about that when you see the clip.
Problem je u tome što vidim kako se vojnici šetaju po ulici i da prolaze kamioni. Pogledajte, eto tamo.
You see the buses here? These are very important for my story. When we were investigating this in the tribunal, we never saw this. The video footage ended with the argument. The Serbian television, as the camera goes like this, they cut it so that we didn't see the buses. For the first time I see this footage is when they did a film based on my book 4 years ago. So they asked the Serbian media to provide the footage, and they provided the full footage. So now you see the buses. Why the buses are important? Look, what you see here, okay, this happened here, right? There's a Danube, there's a Serbia here, there's a Danube, there's Croatia, there's a hospital. So they block this access, and they put the 5 buses at the back of the hospital, and they secretly remove about 300 people from the hospital before they allow the Red Cross to the hospital. So they secretly move them out. That's what you see. Come in. Then they allow the Red Cross, and as soon as the Red Cross got to the hospital, they put a list of the people who were there, and those people survived. This is from the comics because there are no photographs of this. You know, this is how they were taking the people from the hospital, put them on the buses. This guy, Captain Radic, was the head of the military police who was in charge of moving the people from the hospital to the Yugoslav army barracks in Vukovar and eventually a pig farm off Chara. It's about 5 kilometers south of the city. This is how it looked. That's a hangar, what they used for the machinery, for the tractors and combines and harvesting machines. So they opened the gate. The buses were stopping one by one. There was a paramilitary unit. They took sticks, chains, whatever they could find. And the Croatian civilians, or among them were also the Croatian soldiers who laid down weapons, so they were protected by the Geneva Convention, had to run in a gauntlet, and they were beaten with whatever they could find. Several people were so badly injured that they died in a hangar. There were 2 women among this group. The people were waiting there in a hangar for hours. At the same time, on the 20th of November in the morning, when this is happening, you will see what also happened. Serbian media started to run the story that the Croats, those guys who lost the battle, before they surrendered, they'd murdered 40 Serbian children. You know, the Ustašas are again killing the Serbian people, Serbian children, right? Just imagine the situation. They 3 months fighting each other. The emotions, people are being killed. And then one group wins, second group lose. And into this situation, you start pushing the story that those guys who lost the battle, murdering your children. The bond between the children and the parents is very strong. As I always say, we piss you off sometimes as a parent, right? But there's still strong bond, emotional bond between the children and the parents.
Pa oni su povodili to iz podruma, to je bilo na gomile, spajali su glav, tela, to je sve pravi sam izgledalo. Je li fotografara? Da. Jesi probao da snimiš? Probao sam s njim, mučio sam, međutim, praštali su meća po mene i jedan od njika je repetirao pušku i naredio me da se pustim jer i ja sam poginuo.
See? They are killing the children. What was the result of this? Reuters picked this story and broadcast it across the whole world. The whole world knew that morning that the Croats are killing Serbian children. All the media in former Yugoslavia, printed, radio and televisions, all ran the story that the Croats, the terrorists, the Ustašas, are killing Serbian children. What was the result of that? Terrible beatings in a hangar. Some people were killed there. There are 2 women, right? One of them was wife of the Croatian commander, and she was pregnant. She got a little baby in her belly, Croatian baby. So they ordered her out of the hangar. The 2 paramilitary commanders order her out of the hangar, order her to undress, she probably thought that she will be raped, whatever she might have thought. But that wasn't good enough. Those people were murdering Serbian children. They took Kalashnikov, this is the automatic rifle, put it on her genitals and shot her through. So they killed the Croatian child, right? You're killing Serbian children, so here we go. And then, because it's a very powerful weapon, part of the flesh of that woman ended up on the cheek of one of those commanders. So when he comes back to the hangar, they're asking him, what do you have on your face? And the other guy says, pussy. So he got the nickname, Pussy, because of the flesh on his cheek. This is how bad the whole thing was. In the evening, those thugs went to the commander of the operation, Colonel Mrksic, and told him that they want to kill the Croats because those were the ones who were murdering the Serbian children. But it was a career officer. He knew that he cannot participate in it. He had to make a big decision. He was fighting together with the Serbian paramilitaries against the Croats, but now, because of the Geneva Convention, he was supposed to protect the Croats against the paramilitaries who were the Serbs. He didn't want to do that, but he knew that he cannot participate in it. So he ordered the whole component of that, of the regular army, to pull out of Ovčara, and he basically handed over those detainees, if you will, to the paramilitaries, and they murdered all of them, 265 of them, overnight. They dumped them in a mass grave. So in the morning, they were all dead. In the morning, there's a news.
Jugoslovenski fotoreporter koji je prijavio da je 41 dete bilo masakrirano blizu Vukovara, navodno od strane hrvatskih snaga, opovrgao je danas ključne elemente svoje priče, priznajući da nije video ni izbrojao tela.
So they pulled the story. Reuters actually pulled the story much sooner. It took for some time the Yugoslav media actually to pull the story, but eventually they did. But for the people at Ovčara, it was too late. They were all murdered. I will show you a little bit more fake news. I think fake news is very topical these days. This is very personal fake news for me. You know, I was working for a year in Sarajevo in 1994 as the head of the UN field security. And I was staying in a Holiday Inn hotel. It was a hotel built for the Olympics. At the time when I was there, it was actually quite ruined, but we still could live at the back of the hotel. And in front of the hotel, there was a boy about that big, begging for batteries for Walkman. Do you know what Walkman is? Younger generations don't, you know, because they have iPads and iPhones and all these things, so not everybody knows it. It was basically like iPad, but on the batteries and the tapes. So he did not have batteries because he couldn't buy them. So, sir, batteries, please, buy me batteries. And sir, coming from Prague to a war, had all kinds of different problems than buying the batteries for a young boy. So I always forgot it. And one day I'm coming back to the hotel and I will show you a video at the end. This is what I'm referring to.
Yet to enjoy full peace. Unpredictable sniper fire continues to be a daily menace, even on the tramway system. And since mid-November, a number of rocket and mortar attacks into built-up areas has increased dramatically.
As everybody knows, that around the Holiday Inn, this is the most dangerous part of town. The other dangerous part is Dobrina and area around the airport.
Meanwhile, the terror on the streets continues unabated, and the number of deaths and injuries is again on the rise.
Sniper shot is in the head. Now, I always use a rude expression, so I apologize for this. You know, what dickhead can point a rifle at a child? You know, it is not like a grenade. In a war, people are dying. Children, women, men, elderly. War is brutal. explosion, grenade explodes, the shrapnels kill. It's terrible. But this means more. You need to have a rifle with a cross, and you need to point at the head of the child, and you need to pull the trigger. It requires something more than that, right? What dighead would pull a trigger on a child? It's not military target. So I was thinking about why somebody would do this.
Muslimanski ekstremisti dosjetili su se valjda najstravičnijeg načina mučenja na planeti. Protekle noći srpsku nejak žive su bacali u kaveze lavovina u zoološkom vrtu Pionirska dolina, tvrdi srpska straža sa Pomolja.
So, the Bosnian Muslims, the terrorists, are throwing Serbian children into the cages as a bite for lions. So you're killing our children. So it's much easier then, right? To kill yours. It was all propaganda, fake news. One more before we move on. Look, this is a painting which was Juroš Predić, orphan crying on the grave of the parents. In black and white, in 1994, different story. That's orphan that cries on the grave of his parents, which were murdered by the Muslims in Srebrenica. See, all the time, emotions. All the time, children, parents. You need to attack the emotions. You know, you stop thinking with your brain because you are overtaken by emotions. That's the word propaganda. The Serbian media apologized for this 20 years later. It took them almost 20 years to apologize for this. And they apologized to Serbian people. If you read that, they actually apologized to the Serbian people and others living in the former Yugoslavia. They were supposed to apologize to the others first because they were dying. The Croats in Ovčara and the people in Srebrenica. Okay, let's back to the war crimes. Now, some of the images will be very graphical. Again, warning, please. If you don't want to look at this, don't. Close your eyes, turn your head. I had a few instances recently when people get sick. Because of that, not everybody is prepared to look at these things. I'm pre-warning. Okay? Look, that's Ovčara. In the movies, in the films, I love it, I watch it as well. A helicopter will fly over with the thermal vision. There will be this blue thing and something will be darker. And there are smart investigators there and they look at this and say, look, it's darker blue, it means there's a heat. So there must be a grave or there must be some decomposition because the decomposition creates the heat, right? It's good for the movie. It's also good for the fresh, dead bodies. In a war situation, nobody will fly a helicopter because they can shoot it down. And B, when the helicopter gets over this, it's already so cold that there is no darker blue. So you need what? You need witnesses. You need witnesses for that. There's the one, Zdenko Novak. Zdenko Novak was driven to the mass grave on a tractor together with his mates from Vukovar. And he says, guys, nobody's guarding us, let's jump. And they say apparently, don't be stupid, they are going to kill us. And he responded, what do you think they are going to do to us? Let's try, let's run. They didn't. He jumped, he ran away, he survived. Everybody else from that ended up in a mass grave. He met with Dr. Clyde Snow. If you remember Indiana Jones, the movie, he was one of the people who were used for the role of the Indiana Jones. He's an American forensic anthropologist. Famous, he did Tutankhamun, Dr. Mengele. You know, if you remember the terrorist attack in Oklahoma, he was working on identification of the people there. He was sent as a part of the Mazowiecki Commission to former Yugoslavia to see what happened there. And he met Zdenko Novak in Zagreb, and he tells him the story. And based on that, Quaisno travels there, and he finds the grave. The grave is here. See the skull. You see a chain with a Croatian Catholic cross and a dog tag with the inscription Bog I Hrvati, God and Croats. So they immediately knew that Serbs would never put this on their neck. So clearly Croat killed them. They started the exhumation. It was a physician for human rights. It's an NGO from the US. They started the exhumation with the Belgian military doing the demining for it. In this test trench, they found remains of 9 people, but then the Serbian authorities came and ordered them to stop the exhumation because there was not good time for it. Right? So they had to put the black tarpaulin on the bottom of the trench and cover it up, and they left. Then we came back. 4 years later, I came there as a lead investigator to do the exhumation, again with the physician for human rights. And now we are getting to these more graphic images. We need to find the grave first. They wanted to be helpful. The UN was called UNTAES. They wanted to be helpful, and they really were helpful to us because they leveled the whole thing with a bulldozer. So all the evidence on the surface was pushed on the big pile. The trees with the bullets in it, the spent cartridges on the floor, it was all pushed in one big pile. So we couldn't find the grave. So what happened was we had to dig 2 test trenches to see whether the tarpaulin is still there. So you will see 2 short videos how we were going about it. Before we get there, you see the lady with the stick? Whenever we found head, human beings usually have only one head. So when we found head, we put a number to it. So OVC, first body 1, right? And everything which was around that body will be put together in a body bag for the future post-mortem examination, right? So what she is doing, there's a triangulation measuring. Today will be done by GPS. At the time the GPS was not working properly. So we had to do it in the old-fashioned way.
The grave edge is up there somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's this string.
It could be.
So here's another string.
Is it going in the right direction?
Yeah.
So we are looking for the tarpaulin.
Beautiful.
So that should be it.
That should be it.
How far down below that
It's
should we?
22 centimeters to the first piece of clothing.
On the string?
Yeah, which would be original ground surface.
Does it mean that we are in a correct spot?
Yeah, well, we knew we had 7 meters to play with.
I'm sorry, what?
This may be it. Because we did put plastic over everybody. Okay, good.
Are there any lawyers here? No? Okay, then the joke doesn't make a difference. But I always say here that when I have a lawyer's colleague, I said, it's the only example that I know where the lawyers actually have a shovels and a picks, because we all did the digging. So it was investigators, lawyers, forensics, everybody, even the lawyers were there.
The floor of our trench is real uneven because we just stopped wherever we hit human remains. And so here's our highest human remain, which is the arm. You can see the green shirt sleeve there. But again, it's real irregular, so we've left a little dirt barrier over that individual. And here you can see the next human remains are quite a bit lower. And I remember putting this board up in '92 to protect a cranium that's exposed down there. We have the grave fairly well delineated within our cross trenches. This would be the on the basis of soil color and texture. This is the northern end, and it's, what did we measure? 8.15 meters from there down this way. Again, on the basis of soil color, we have the end of it right here. And I think it's clear that we have some individuals in here. If you can see some of the standing water there, you can see the bubbles. That's probably methane gas from decomposition of the bodies.
Guys, do you see from the back as well? Because of the light here. Can you see it? Okay, good. So now before I run this, one thing I have to tell you. Exhumation has a lot of problems. One, everything stinks. As soon as you open the grave, terrible stench comes out of it. So, you're working in terrible stench. You're in a mud that is in your shoes. When it dries, it makes dust. It gets onto your clothing, onto your skin. You stink as well. You can't wash it for some time. So everything stinks. When you open the grave, flies come. Hundreds of thousands of flies. They smell it. They sit on you, on your food, on the dead bodies. It's terrible work. I spent 7 weeks there. It's terrible work. The gravitation pushed the bodies down, right? It's natural, it's pushing it down. And the decomposition releases liquids. It glues it together. So the bodies in the grave are glued together. And remove the body from the grave is a very physical work. Very unpleasant, very physical. You see here one example of what it takes to take the body out of the grave.
Roll him into the bag. This way. Just roll him over. Just roll him right here.
Being put in the body bag, zipped up, everything which is around it comes with it, is taken to a refrigerating container. Because as soon as you take it out of the ground, you expose it to air and the heat, and it's faster the decomposition. So you need to put it into the refrigerator. So that's what you see is being done. You see, every bag is one body. We were looking for evidence, for bullets, for spent cartridges, for the rings, for the jewelry, for the ID cards. Anything can be used for identification. Because our goal was two things. First, three things. Exhume the bodies, then find out the ID of those people, who actually they are, and how they died. That's what you need for the indictment, right? So we put them in the mortuary. The same thing, like every single murder here in Bratislava or in Prague or wherever. The body goes through the same process. You need to do the post-mortem that will withstand the scrutiny of the court, right? So what you see here is 200 in the grave. There was 200 bodies in the grave. The 65 are still missing. We didn't find them. Nobody found them. They are still missing. So we found 200 bodies into this grave. Every single one went through this process.
1, 2, 3. Okay, let's go over another one.
Yeah. See, here's the infusion.
Yeah, exactly the same.
we've recovered 5 bullets from him so far. But the other thing is he's got this bag and this tubing, which looks to me like it would have been a wound drain, a bit of tubing put into a wound to drain fluid or blood out of it. So this was plainly a man who had been injured and was still in hospital suffering the effects of his injury.
It was good lead for us at the time, because this body clearly came from a hospital, right? Because it had the tubing. We still had to identify the person. We took all the clothing of those people, washed it, so that it could be used for identification. So you see, at the bottom of the grave, they were so well preserved that they had, for example, tattoos on their hands or on their bodies. So on the top of the grave is used most skeletonized bodies because of the access of the air and water and heat. And the bottom, there was a very well preserved body, even after 5 years.
32 or 52.
Okay, we were taking their DNA samples. Now here, when they finish with the thing, they put the bones on the table so they could examine it. They washed the saponized flesh, so they put it back on the table, and they were looking for like injuries, dental records, whatever could be used for the identification. Here you actually have 2 examples. It's a typical shot at the back of the head, typical execution. This one is a trauma on the right side of the skull. It's just for you to see how it works. We'll skip this. When I was talking about how unpleasant it is for investigators to work on a grave, how it stinks and everything, you can wash it eventually. Much worse is what we have to deal with at the mortuary. The people, the families, didn't want to hear that their loved ones are dead. They wanted to hear that they are somewhere in a concentration camp in Serbia, in Kosovo, and the international community doing nothing about it to bring them back home. And you represent the international community, right? You, investigator from the tribunal, represent the international community in the eyes of the families. So you invite the families to the mortuary and hand them over a pile of bones and stinking clothes, and you tell them that's your son, it's your father, or your daughter. The emotion that it generates, this is much worse than the stench they have to deal with. It's very difficult to wash the emotions. It's very bad work.
Okay, height 180, weight 80, right-handed, brown hair, and he was in the hospital because of a gunshot wound to the upper leg.
Now,
okay, there's dental information. Missing teeth, bridge.
the only way we can come up with identifications on these people is to have something in the way of dental traits, physical traits, that can tell us beyond reasonable doubt that this particular skeleton is such and such a person and essentially no other person on earth. We start looking at the features that we can collect from old records or from interviews with families or friends, such as estimates of his stature, right or left-handedness, things that we can determine from the skeleton.
So this is what you hand over to the families, so this is what you see. This is their loved ones, right? Out of the 200 until today, as far as I know, 193 were identified positively. 7 still hasn't been identified. And one family, even after the DNA testing, positive DNA testing, refused to accept the reality that this is the, I don't know, father or son or something. Now, it's a time to compete for my book. because I think I sort of tortured you enough with the dead bodies. So I need 2 ladies and 2 gentlemen. I used to work for the UN. The gender balance, very important. Also, my wife is watching that from the back, and she'll kick my ass if I didn't do that. So, 4. 2 ladies and 2 gentlemen. There's a gentleman over there. Okay. There's a lady here. Please. Okay. So 1 more man. Come on, guys. What's wrong with you? Okay, at the back. Can you come up here for the paper, please? And I'll also give you pens. If you have your own, please. And if you don't have your own, sorry, I will give you this. University. Yeah? Do you have your pen? Yes. And? You? Yes, good. So we have 4 competitors. Please write your name on it. And I have 2 referees here. I identify 2 referees here. No. 2 referees here. These 2 guys. Who will be the referees for this competition? So I want to be biased in it, right? Who am I? Listen to me very carefully. Identification of suspects, it's a pain in the neck. It's a pain in the neck. We had 4 for this case, plus the shooters. I will take it separately. 4. Colonel Mrksic, later General Mrksic, was the one who decided to pull the people up, his people out of Ovčara. He was the commander of the operation. He got 20 good years for that. This one, with the similar hairstyles that I have, is Major, later Colonel Slivanchanin. He's the guy who stopped the Red Cross on the bridge. He got 17 years initially. It was dropped to 10 years because of some circumstances. That's Captain Radic. You saw it in the comics with the helmet. He was the commander of the military police. He transported the people from the hospital to the Ovčara. We didn't prove beyond reasonable doubt that he knew that his people are going to be killed. So he was acquitted. But for our story, it's most important is Slavko Dokmanovic. He was the mayor of Vukovar. Mayor of Vukovar. We had 2 witnesses, Dragutin Berghofer and Emil Čakalic, who knew him before the war. They used to play football together. On the top of that, he was the mayor of the city. He was a known person. And they saw him in a hangar kicking into the people. So we indicted him together with his others. Those were indicted in an open indictment, right? But because the tribunal had the problem that we were indicting people, but nobody arrested anybody. Nobody wanted to arrest anybody because the state of Yugoslavia is saying, well, we cannot do it. They are our citizens, even if it wasn't true. The constitution doesn't allow us. For example, he was a Croatian citizen, he was a Serb. He was hiding in Serbia, but they still couldn't, even though it was a lie. Because he wasn't a citizen of Serbia, he was only Serb ethnicity. So the prosecutor decided, it was Judge Golston, who was the prosecutor, the first one, who decided to do the secret indictments, sealed indictments. So we will indict the people without them knowing they were indicted, which will allow us to approach them as witnesses and to try to arrest them, right? So Slavko was on the sealed indictment for us. And we had 2 witnesses who positively identified him. Skip this, you don't have time for it. Now the identification is a problematic for a number of reasons. And we were lucky that those people knew Dokmanovic before the war. So it was not the situation when you walk on the street, you have the earphones, you're talking to a friend, and something happens, and you turn and you see something in a split of the second. And then colleagues will come to you, police, and start to ask you the smart questions. how tall the person was, what kind of hair he had, you know, what kind of eyes he had or she had, right? And then in the movies, I love it, because then the witness, he or she knows about everything. And they do the identikit, and they put it in the computer, and they press C, and come whoop, and they have a name and address, and then go and arrest him. I'm making fun of it, but this is not how it's not working in reality. It's not how it works. It will be just too easy. Few things. Attention, I talk about attention. You don't look for it. You just do your own business when something happens, right? So it affects your ability to see and remember. It's critical. You don't focus on it. Right? The memory is fading. Further you get from the time when something happens, more affected the memory is. It could be affected by, for example, media or talking to friends. These people in Ovčara, they live together in a refugee camps, and they all talk to each other. It all affects your own memory. Because sometimes this happens that you put stories of somebody else into your own head, and you actually believe. It's not that you lie about it. You actually believe, because the memory gets affected by this. I will get to this very quickly. This is another one. Our problems to see or to hear. And my good wife always said that when we were living in New York, I could see a pretty girl across the Fifth Avenue. But when we were in a restaurant and tried to order food, I need a magnifying light or telephone. I will take a picture of the menu and spread it so I can read it, right? Making in front of it, but again, the problem is our ability to see and hear things are somehow limited for each individual. Now the logics. Logic is a pain in the neck in this context. Look at this. First, I need cooperation. When you see what it is, tell me what it is. Okay? What is it? Any other opinion? No? This is a dog. What you saw before was the black spots moved on the white background. Right? It wasn't dog. This is a dog. Right? The logic, your brain operates like this. Your brain tells you, because I know how Dalmatian dog looks, right? So you see these things and say, that was Dalmatian. Right? But it's not. It was the black spots moving on the white background. This is the problem of the logic. Logic put things together, right? But not always in favor of the criminal investigation. Now the game. I'll be watching like a hawk, that nobody cheats here, because it's not fair to everybody else. Also, please be quiet. Don't talk about what you see in it. You might know it, because it's no secret, so it wouldn't be fair to those people who try to compete, okay? Is it a deal? Yeah. Good. There's a short video where two teams of girls. One team has a white shirt, and one team has black shirts, and they are passing the ball to each other. So the white team is passing the ball to the white, and the black team is passing the ball to the black. Your task is to count how many times the white team passes the ball among each other. I'm using the term passing because they can give, throw, or do it across the ground. It doesn't matter. You just count how many times the ball will be passed. White to white. Even if you know it, there's no problem. Just do it. There's more to come.
Count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball.
Don't say, just write it down, please. How many times they passed the ball? I always joke about that. The professor of mathematics envy me this because I manage so many people to count at the same time. See? Actually getting some money for that. Another task. It's much more difficult now. There'll be a short video. Things are happening on this. Because you all speak English, I'm not going to be telling you anything. If I do it in Czech or something, I always tell them the story. But you watch it, you listen to it, and when it's finished, I will ask you a question. All right?
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's goat below stairs.
I was planting my petunias in the potting shed. Constable, arrest Lady Smythe. But how did you know? Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away. It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
So doing this short video, the background of the short video, many things were changed. I want you to write down I don't want you to spell what you saw. It's just too complicated, too time consuming. Just write down how many changes you saw were happening in the background of this story. Write it down, please. I will show it to you, of course, when we're done with this. So write the number. It's an individual work. I see everything. I'm like a hawk with a big nose.
Investigate.
Yes. It's individual work. Now, another task. There's a UN unit operating some kind of peacekeeping operation. And one of those guys committed crimes. You know, I was doing, I'm not going to say that because they're recording it. Okay. I have a funny story about that, but I'm going to hold it back. There is suspect. That's the bad guy, this one. Look at him carefully. This is just to fool you, that you don't see, you don't have it in your brain, right? Now, that's what you do as a witness. Everybody's quiet, and the competing people write down under which number is the suspect. Why I use this unit? Because they are not ethnically Europeans. Another problem that we have in our brain is that we do not recognize so easily people of other ethnicities. It has nothing to do with racism. That's the same across. It's proven. The black people can recognize us, we can recognize the blacks, Asians. Right? My last task for you guys is this. In this first video, where the girls were passing the ball, other things were happening. And I need you to write what else you saw happening in the background of when they were passing the ball. It's your last task for the evening. Then the task comes to the referees now. I will tell you the results, of course.
I think I'm done.
Okay. Okay. Do you have a name on it?
On that side, no. Not everywhere else.
Do you have a name on it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Do you have a name? Lenka? The other guys can... Oh. Thank you. It's all yours. The result. Just watch the result.
Watch the result.
Watch the result. Number 5. The passes is 16. So the 16 passes. This is 5. Look at this.
Watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there
The
goes
ghost goes,
and the curtain is changing from red
and the
to
curtain changing. So you have a gorilla, one girl left, and the curtain
Looking
changed.
for a gorilla, you often miss other unexpected events.
And the changes is 21. So whoever has the closest number has a point for that. 21 changes. Watch it. So, 16:5.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
I was fighting my juniors in the rocking chair. Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
So my whole point here is this. Very important to understand that we are not capable of seeing everything. And for the police investigators, it's very important they don't plant information in people's heads. Because the question, did the lady has a blonde hair? Right? It's a wrong question. Because if the witness wants to make us happy, or she or he, if they don't know the answer, they want to make us happy because they don't want to look stupid. Right? Very often, unless it's like my wife, she knows everything. Right? She has no problem with this. But normal people, if they don't know, they are ashamed to say, I don't know. Of course, I'm making fun of it, but the truth is that the question should be what kind of hair the lady had, what color of hair the lady had, not putting what you want to hear in the minds of the people. You understand each other? Good. Do we have the results yet or not? If they are the same, that will be the God's decision. You know this paper thing? You know this? So if there are two the same, then there will be a decision by this.
A question. The crime scene,
yes,
number items changed, was number, it was 4 or which one?
It was a 16:5,
yeah.
then should be this 21,
yeah.
And then should be the gorilla, the lady, and the curtain.
Too late.
Do we have the winner?
Yeah, I think so.
Who is the winner?
Magdalena.
Magdalena? Magdalena? And two. The Czech comics or the English?
May I choose the Czech, please?
Okay. It's all yours.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Good. Well done. We are getting close to the end of this. This is a prison in Scheveningen. It's a beautiful place. Some of the dormitories of the universities are not as good as that. I really wish all the victims had the same treatment as our suspects. Beautiful. There was one problem with this. You don't see what's the problem? There are no prisoners. Nobody wanted to arrest anybody. So we put together Operation Little Flower. You know, Little Flower, we need a code name for this. The code name we chose because Dokmanovic was a mayor of Vukovar, mayor, and LaGuardia was a mayor of New York, and his first name was Fiorello, which allegedly means little flower in English. So we had the code name Operation Little Flower. Nothing to do with the flowers though. How it came about? A big pressure on the tribunal. Arresting, arresting, arresting. We have judges, prosecutors, we had about everybody there, no prisoners. We had sealed indictments, no prisoners, right? And I had a coffee with a colleague of mine who was working on the opposite team. She was working for the crimes committed by Croats and the Serbs. She came from Belgrade. And we had a coffee at the cafeteria. And we were chit-chatting. Tatiana was telling me, I was talking to these witnesses, and blah, 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 Slavko Dokmanovic. She wanted to talk to our suspect. She talked to our suspect. She didn't know he was indicted because it was sealed indictment. So I said, hey, Tanya, we also need to talk to him. I couldn't tell her. You know? I said, we also need to talk to him. Do you have any contact details for him? I said, I've got a telephone number and address. He was hiding in Serbia. I said, okay, can I have it? And she said, yeah, no problem, Vlad, I will give it to you. I apologized to her later for this, but I couldn't tell her. So she gave me the address and the telephone number, and I went to see our lawyer, Clint Williamson. I was telling him, listen, Clint, we can try to trick him to come from Serbia to Hungary, one possibility, and do the request for the arrest, regulatory commission, it's called, or we can get him to Vukovar, which was controlled by the UN, and arrest him there. He said, well, do you know where he is? So I pulled my secret paper. He said, yes, this is the address and telephone number for him. So we went to see the prosecutor. At the time, it was Louise Arbour of Canada. Colston was gone by then. Louise Arbour was a trial prosecutor. You know, she was switched on. She wanted to get the job done. And so we told her the story, that we can actually try to trick. And then she says, what are the problems with this man? And we told her, somebody can get killed, somebody can get injured, we can create a problem because it hasn't been tested. From the end of the World War II, nobody arrested indicted war criminal. Apart from Eichmann, which was arrested by Israelis in Argentina, but it was the Israeli government and Argentinian government. It was not international tribunal. So it was completely untested. This lady, she gave us some time. We were sitting around the table. It was complete quiet. We were waiting for the verdict. And she says, well, if nobody else does it, we have to try. She gave us a green light for the operation. We put it together. We initially called him to get him across. He agreed with this, but then he changed his mind because he was afraid that the Croats would arrest him. So we gave him a guarantee that the Croats would not arrest him. He asked the wrong question. He wanted the guarantee that the Croats would not arrest him, which we could easily give it to him without lying, because we had no interest to give him to Croatian government. Eventually, we decided to go to see him. It's all described in the book, quite in detail, because it was a unique operation. So we went to see him in Sombor, where he was hiding. Kevin Curtis, a good colleague of mine, he actually talked to him, interviewed him as a witness of the crimes committed by Croats and the Serbs, and tried to persuade him to come across the border. But Dokmanovic was still afraid. At this moment, a daughter and a granddaughter of Dokmanovic came into the room, and they had a chit-chat. And she said, no, we have a house close to Vukovar where we cannot live. We cannot even sell it. And Kevin was witty. He said, well, I might help you. I might organize a meeting between you and General Klein, who was the administrator. We can discuss the sale of the house if you want. And they agreed that they would like to discuss the selling the house. So he got a guarantee that Croats wouldn't arrest him. You see, Kevin, this is from the comics. Kevin Curtis sitting with Dokmanovic in the house in Sombor, his wife, preparing coffee. We had a SWAT team. It was the Polish Special Forces. It's called Grom. They were operating in the area. They are something like Urna in Czechia. I'm sure that in Slovakia have something similar. Special Forces anti-terrorist operation. So we had them trained for this, and then this is how it happened. Dokmanovic, and this is Mr. Knežević, who was also detained, but then he was released, had nothing to do with it. He also wanted to sell a house. It was the house selling business. See, he was handcuffed. They took everything from him, searched him, took everything from him, and gave this everything what he had to my colleague Kevin Curtis. And then I come in and I officially arrest him. It's called Miranda in English. But basically, I have to tell him who I am, why he's arrested, and what we are accusing him of.
Ja sam izvršitelj izvršitelja tužbe na Međunarodnom krivičnom sudu za bivšu Juhoslaviju.
You are charged in an indictment and named in an arrest warrant issued by the tribunal.
Vi se teretite u optužnici i vaše ime navedeno u nalogu za hapšenje koji je izdao Međunarodni krivični sud.
You are charged with the great breaches of the Geneva Convention, crimes against humanity, and violations of the laws or customs of war for your role in the beatings and killings which occurred at Ovčara Farm near Vukovar on the 20th of November 1991. Do you understand?
Optuženi ste za teške povrede Ženevske konvencije, zločini protiv čovječnosti, kršenje ratnih zakona i ratnih običaja zbog vaše uloge u mučenju i ubijanju na farmi Ovčara u zoni Vukovara 20. oktobra 1991. godine. Da li ste razumjeli ovo što vam je rečeno? I understood, but it's not true.
Okay, I cut it because it's longer, the reading. For what you see is enough, to see. He put a hood over his head, so the cross would not recognize him. Because we had to cross from the UN controlled territory to airport in Chepin, which is close to Osijek, which was controlled by the government. So he gets in the armored car, and we are being transported. We and our lawyers tried to cover every possibility. All the problems were supposed to be happening in Serbia, right? Why the problems will be happening in Croatia? We are the good guys, right? Well, not always your planning goes aligned with what actually was happening. We go to the airport. We had a doctor, a medical doctor, to examine Dokmanovic. Just imagine, there was a Belgian Air Force plane parked there with a pre-approved permission to take off. The SWAT team that you saw there, surrounding the area, helmets, machine guns, armored vests, ready, right? And 3 Croatian policemen shows up there, just with the sidearms, with a single question. Who is that guy with the hood? And we said, we cannot tell you. And they said, you are not flying anywhere. And like this, the permission to take off was withdrawn. 40 degrees of Celsius on the tarmac. Stand still. We tried to negotiate. It always ended up, who is that guy? The answer was always, we can't tell you. Eventually, because it was getting really difficult, also because Dokmanovic had his hood over his head in the heat, we were afraid that he's going to choke in it. He was not a young man. So eventually, Clint Williamson calls the Deputy Prime Minister of Croatia, Ivica Kostovic, explain him the situation. and he says, give the telephone to the police. So Clint gave the telephone to the policeman. There was some blah, 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 talking. They left. So short after that, the pilot told us, they renewed our permission to take off. We all jumped into the aircraft, shut the door, and then the plan was, as soon as possible, to get out of the airspace of Croatia. Because the concern was that if they changed mind and ordered the pilot to land back in Croatia, he would have to, even if it was military, he would have to obey the order. So we need to get across to Hungary, it's close. So up and to Hungary, right? Then the pilot tells us, we left the airspace of Croatia. And he was like, yes! Everything is cool, we have him. Big excitement, right? So we are flying, and then Clint Williamson gives him the indictment in Serbian, the whole indictment in Serbian, because it's a due process. He needs to be given the accusation so he can read it. I need my bag. He's got his leather bag. I need to put it in it. And Kevin says, no, give it to me, I will put it in it. Shortly after that, I need a cigarette. I don't feel well. Give me the bag. I have a cigarette. And Kevin, you can smoke my cigarette. I'm not smoking your cigarettes because you tricked me. My wife is cooking dinner for you. Because the plan was, when they finish in Vukovar, they'll go back to Sombor. And there was supposed to be dinner, right? So he says, I'm sorry, I can't give you the bag. My cigarettes are no cigarettes. We landed in Falkenberg. It's a military base, or it was a military base close to The Hague. The police took us to the prison. So we walk into the prison. Clint Williamson hands over the suspect to the prison, and we, as the investigators, we hand over the things. So Kevin Curtis, being a British policeman who never had a gun in his hand, put a hand into the bag and pulled off the bag loaded Zastavo revolver. And he goes like this, Vlad, what should I do with it? He's holding the gun like this. You know, not like this, but like this. And I said, put it on the table. So he puts it on the table. And then the security people come. Because we walked into the prison with loaded gun. Through the thing, you know? Through the frame. They just didn't see it. So there was a big problem for the guards in the prison. Luckily, it wasn't a problem for us. Because they were supposed to check it. The whole thing is this. It was a successful operation. Nobody got killed. Nobody got injured. He was in the prison. Now the question is, was it legal or not? Another problem with our lawyers. I'm not anti-lawyer, don't take me, you know, but they made a mistake. When Dokmanovic came to the bridge, when you saw the cars, his task was to cross the checkpoint, the Serbian checkpoint, so that we would not be on the territory of Serbia. There will be kidnapping if he took him from the country. We need him on voluntary basis to cross the checkpoint. He did it. We parked the vehicles just past the checkpoint. The problem is that the border between Serbia and Croatia is not past the checkpoint, but in the middle of the river. So technically we were still parked on the territory of Serbia. So technically it was a kidnapping. It was the first big mistake of his lawyer, Mr. Fila. He had him testify as a witness in his own trial. Our American lawyers were saying it might be stupid or something. You know, why he would put his suspect, expose him cross-examination? Because as a defendant, he doesn't have to say anything. He doesn't have to talk to us. He doesn't have to do anything. But as a witness, under oath, he's going to tell the truth, right? So Clint Williamson, being the prosecutor in this case, asked a nice question. He said, Mr. Dokmanovic, when did you feel that you were arrested? And Dokmanovic, honestly, under oath, responded, when the Polish troops took me out of the car, which was well on the territory of Croatia. So on his own testimony, under oath, he told the judges that he felt arrested when he was taken out of the car. As a result of this, the judge could dismiss the motion of the defense to release him because it was kidnapping, and basically give a clear to the trial, where Dokmanovic was trialed, and I'll get quickly to this, but this arrest allowed the prosecutor to go to Brussels, to the NATO, and tell them, you have thousands of troops in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and you are saying that you cannot arrest anybody. And these crazy people from my office arrested Dokmanovic. Nobody was arrested, nobody was killed, nobody was injured, right? So they had to do something. So SAS, under the NATO head, about 2 weeks later, went to Prijedor. There were 3 indicted for genocide. So they arrested one. The other one was stupid enough to put up with them, that they shot him dead. The third one ran to Serbia, where he was hiding, and eventually later was arrested by the Serbian police and handed over to the tribunal. So the impact of that was that it was a successful operation in which we proved that it can be done. Now until then it was used as a precedent for the arrest. So this is the end of my presentation. I know it's longer than I thought, but I always talk too much when I get to this. But now is the time for questions. If you have still time, if you want to ask questions, if you want to moderate the questioning, you are more than welcome. But please use the opportunity. Yes, please.
I don't understand the reason why the man who was arrested got covered his head. I don't understand the reason.
I understand that, what you say. I understand the question. Because we had to cross from the UN controlled territory in Vukovar to the airport in Chepin, which was in the hands of the Croatian government. It was already Croatian-free territory. And there was like a border between the UN controlled area and the Croatian territory. And we were concerned that the Croatian police will recognize him in the car, and there was an indictment for him in Croatia, Croatian indictment. So we were afraid that they would recognize him and make him the problem.
If you see that was covered, they could ask.
They could, but they could. But it was more dangerous because they knew him. He was the mayor of the city. So when the troops sit next to him, he was in the middle of the car. The likelihood that they would see the guy with the hood, with the tinted glasses, was much less than if he actually had to face to it. So it was a decision he made. Maybe it was wrong, but we thought it was the best decision at the time.
Because I know that there is a sentence of the European Court of Justice that say that cover the head of criminal is against human rights. So
yes, probably today, if it was done today, probably the arrest wouldn't have happened. But we are talking about 1991. Sorry, 1997. Sorry, but still, it probably wouldn't happen now. You are right, absolutely. Any other question? Yes, please.
I'd like to ask a question because it surprised me quite a bit at the end. With the bag, how is it possible that it wasn't checked by the Polish SWAT team? I get that it was before 9/11, so I guess there wasn't that much fear of like bombs or something at the
It wasn't
board.
that. No, you're right. It wasn't that. The reason why it was because we need to get from the place there to the plane and out of Yugoslavia as soon as possible. So decision was made that we are not going to go through the things. Normally in arrest you will go through item, you take a piece of paper and write down ID card, this, the watches, right? You make like a thing and you have him to sign it. Decision was done that it's not going to be happening until we get to the prison, right? Again, right or wrong? It was wrong, but
was there no fear of any, like, for example, like bomb being in there either? Did you not feel
there was the highest criticism that we get for this, that we didn't do it. Decision was done on this. It was not like that we didn't do it. The decision was made that we are not going to check it until we get to the prison. In hindsight, we probably should have. We probably should have done at least at the airport when we were waiting there for the, for the police to resolve the situation with the takeoff. But it hasn't been done. and we could have gotten killed. You know, if Kevin gave him the bag, he would be the only armed person on the aircraft. Maybe the pilots because they were military, I don't know, but still, you know, we were lucky. We were lucky. Again, you know, you plan things, you make the best effort, and not everything goes well. We were lucky in this. There was enough bullets in the pistol to deal with us. Yes, please.
A question, like, did the suspect have time to meet with his lawyer before the court was held? Because I don't understand why would the lawyer not prepare him for the question of like what to tell the court that he would be not be as a suspect. Because if he told the story that he felt that he was I don't know, like from the beginning at the territory of Serbia, then this wouldn't have happened. So
the lawyer had access to him. They even tried to interview him. Before this in the court happened, we actually tried to interview him because it was the best for us would be to have him as a cooperating suspect. Because the big suspects were the colonel and the major and the captain. So we would have easily go for the cooperating suspect in this case. But the lawyer basically allowed us in the prison with him. He refused to answer any questions. So Phil had access to him from the very beginning. He made another mistake. He actually had him to testify in the trial as a witness. Nobody understood why he did it. Because if you consider what kind of problems he created in this motion when he testified and basically told the truth about when he felt to be arrested. In fact, he was arrested as soon as he entered the car. There was no way he could leave the car. The Polish will never let him out. So he was basically arrested there and then. As soon as he came in the car, the doors were shut, that was the end of it. The fact that he had testified on the oath that he felt arrested there was in our favor. But again, the reality was the arrest actually took place there and then, as soon as he entered the car. Right? He had him, after this fiasco, he had him testify one more time during the trial. We thought that he didn't defend him. We thought he defended Serbia because they didn't want him to be prosecuted. He was suicidal and they still pushed him. Eventually he committed suicide. 10 days before the verdict, he actually killed himself. And it was such a bad news for everybody, for his family. He would never get death sentence from the tribunal. He probably would have gotten 10 years or something, for his role, because it was not the major role in it. But he still killed himself. He was under suicide watch and he still managed to kill himself. He hung himself on the tie. For the victims, it was terrible. They were waiting finally. Nobody wanted to have him killed. Everybody wanted him to be prosecuted so that when we do the other trials with the Slivančanin and Mrksic, we don't have to prove the crime base. If there was a verdict that the crime happened, then the next trial we will only prosecute or only find evidence about the links between the crime and the people who actually were indicted. And this time, because there was no verdict, we had to start from the beginning. So when Mrksic and Slivančanin and Radic, we were basically starting from the scratch because there was no verdict. So we really thought that maybe Fila was not honestly defending Dukmanovic. He should never let him testify because there was no good reason for it, right? Twice. Any other question? Yes, please.
In Ovčara, you said that you started with the excavations and then you had to leave for 4 years. Was the grave protected during those 4 years, or how did you ensure that the grave was protected? Because we know that in Bosnia, for example, there were secondary or tertiary graves.
Yes. It wasn't us who actually did the initial examination. It was the Physician for Human Rights. It was before the tribunal was established. Dr. Snow and his team actually did the test digging. Now then, the UN put the Russian battalion, Rusbet, on the site, which created the problems in Croatia, because the Croats believed that the Rusbet would make a deal with the Serbs and dig the grave. remove the bodies, which was happening quite often, that the bodies were not with the Russians, but they were moving the bodies out, throwing them in the Danube, for example. Now, it didn't happen. Vrasbat then passed it to Jorbat. Jorbat was guarding the site until we exhumed it. Now, there's one thing on it. We came across a document from the Yugoslav army counterintelligence officer who was writing a message to Belgrade. Blah, 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 blah. And the last paragraph is, we're receiving information that bodies are secretly taken out of Ovčara. Right? There are still 65 bodies missing. We only found 200. I speculate, it's pure speculation. There's a possibility they indeed dug a grave, but they didn't know there were 2 graves, and they only took the small grave out of this. You know, this is a possibility based on this memo from the security officer where secretly bodies are taken out of Ovčara. The bodies are missing. You know, but the grave that they test trenched in 1992 was not touched. And there was a 24/7 protection initially by the Rusbat and then by the Jorbat until we actually exhumed it.
And how do you know that there were more than 260 bodies?
Based on the witnesses.
Okay.
Based on the witnesses. We interviewed everybody who we possibly could, who saw the people in the buses go in. There was 8 people who survived this, apart from Zdenko Novak, who were actually taken out by a Serb. I interviewed him as an insider. He cooperated with us. He was a part of the killing squad, if you will. No, he took 8 people out of this. He was a son of the medical doctor from the hospital, and he was like a black sheep of the family, because everybody in the family were like educated, you know, doctors and stuff, and he didn't do even secondary school. He went to Shit in the city in Serbia, where he joined the paramilitaries, and he came back to Vukovar in a territorial defense, you know, with the uniform, the cockard, you know, the Kalashnikov to the hospital to see the daddy. And daddy says, you got to find Dragutin Berghofer, because he was protecting me, he was a Serb, protecting me during the time in the hospital, and you have to make sure that nothing happens to him. So the guy goes to Ovčara, finds Dragutin Berghofer, and he sees other people that he knew, so he took them, 8 of them, and moved them out, and they survived. They were crucial witnesses to us, including the insider. This guy, he was put in the witness protection, he lives still somewhere outside Yugoslavia. But based on those testimonies, we knew who were on those buses. Probably not 100%, but you know, 65 people was agreed that they were seen in a hospital, they were seen around or on the buses, and they are still missing. I mean, those 65. Any other? Yes, please.
I have a question about other war criminals that when you showed in 1997 that it is possible to bring the war criminal in front of the tribunal. Why then is the gap between the other tribunals? For example, Ratko Mladić, he was sued like 10 or 15 years later than your case. So why is this big gap between
non-cooperation by the states in former Yugoslavia, especially Serbia and Republika Srpska. You know, tribunal could have done much more had the states cooperated. And I have to tell you this. It was impossible to prosecute in Serbia Serbs and Croatia Croats for war crimes. It's easy to prosecute in Croatia Serbs and possibly in Serbia Croats for it. But the courts were not capable of prosecuting their own. They were supposed, this should be prosecuted by the courts in the former Yugoslavia. There was no need for any tribunals. But they failed. So the international community has to substitute this with the tribunal. And they didn't cooperate with us, because we were investigating the people who were on the top of the food chain. You know, Radic, Karadzic, Mladic, you know, Šešel, blah, 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 blah. Plavšič, Jovica Stanisic, head of the Secret Service, Državna bezbednost. So they didn't want to cooperate with us. And this delayed the whole thing. So from the 93, when the tribunal was established, until 2017, when it was dismantled and replaced by this mechanism for the tribunals, we handled 160 cases, 92 people were prosecuted, the rest of that was, they died, they were acquitted, they committed suicide, whatever that could be. Many more could have been done if the countries cooperated with the tribunal. Just for you to understand, just watch my lips. For those operations that the tribunal did from 93 to 2017, the international community paid $2 billion. The whole thing cost $2 billion. The international justice is very expensive. It's much cheaper and much quicker had it been done locally. But unfortunately, they were not prepared to do it themselves. Now, they blame tribunal for the failure. Because of course the tribunal didn't prosecute everybody. There are still war criminals living in the territory who are not prosecuted. And they blame tribunal because it's easier to blame somebody else for it. But it should have been done by the local court, by the local prosecutors, by the local police. It's as simple as that. But they simply would not cooperate. That's delayed it. That's why it costs so much money. Because every delay means that you need to feed the staff. You know, buildings, witness protection, all the other things, it costs more and more money. So it could be much cheaper, it could be much faster. They just didn't want to cooperate. Yes, please?
I just wanted to clarify, all those atrocities happened because of the fake news, that the children being killed. And does those war criminals who killed those people, do they later realize that it was fake?
I don't think that they wanted to accept that story. But it was fake because the territory was under control of the Serbs until 98, I think, when it was handed over back to Croatia. Had the bodies were found, you know, they controlled the territory. If it was true that those children were murdered, it will be all over the media. They will never pull the story. It was a fabrication. It was a fake news, no question about it. So they knew it was a fake news. They broadcast it. They pull it back. We didn't prosecute the people who actually ran the story. It was supposed to be done in Serbia. You know, if it was a crime, it was not necessarily under our mandate. It was supposed to be prosecuted there. The people who did the killing, there was 18 of them. They were eventually prosecuted in Serbia based on our evidence. On the big push by international community, Karel Pontek, it was the next prosecutor, made a deal with Vladimír Dzuro, who was a Serbian prosecutor for war crimes. And the deal was that we are going to hand over the evidence that we have to the prosecutor's office of Vladimír Dzuro, and they will prosecute them. So indeed, he arrested all of them. Very difficult, it's a long story, but eventually they got prosecuted after many appeals and acquittals and stuff like that. Not all of 18 of them, some of them actually died in between. One of them was a woman also, one of the shooters actually was a woman, all of them were men, and they got between 20, the top, and 5 years in prison sentence for killing 265 people. And it was actually done in Serbia, the prosecution. The president of Serbia came to Ovčara 20 years later to apologize for what happened there. It was not this president though, the Tadic, who actually, I don't think this president would go. And the dynamics in the Balkans changed. Yes, please.
To divert a bit from the Balkans towards the Middle East and ask a much more general question towards you as a professional and an expert in that field. Is it possible and is there a will for something similar as the Yugoslav tribunal towards the Israel-Palestina now?
No, it is not. I'll tell you why. There must be different mechanism, not the similar to the tribunal. There is the ICC, the International Criminal Court, which is basically a successor of the ICTY that has to deal with this. The Security Council would not pass the resolution to establish a tribunal for Ukraine and for Israel either. For Ukraine, it's going to be Russians who are going to veto this, and for Israel, it's going to be the Americans who are going to veto this. There's a difference, though, between those two, because in the case of Ukraine, the Russians themselves would veto a resolution against themselves. You know, in the case of Israel, because Israel is only one, and there's so many Arab states which actually are in the UN, US generally vetoes anything that goes against Israel, because Israel cannot defend themselves, you know, in this. So there will be no tribunal for Ukraine and for Israel. If I am wrong, I'll come here and apologize for that, you know. I truly believe in it. It's not going to be. But it doesn't mean that ICC cannot investigate and prosecute, because they have a mandate for it. Limited though, limited mandate, but they still can make inquiries. So they indicted. I don't think it was fair to indict the head of Hamas and President or Prime Minister of Israel at the same time. I just don't believe it was fair, but they did make indictment. The same they indicted President Putin for the crimes, you know, in Ukraine. How successful they could be in actually arresting, that's completely different picture. I just can't imagine that some Vladimír Dzuro or otherwise come on the Kremlin, bang on the door, and says, well, I came to arrest you, and you know, making fun of it. But the reality of that, because they are superpower, you know, nobody wants to cross the superpower. You know, we should be all equal in the world, but the reality is that we are not. You know, the different state based on the population, based on the economics, based on the political standing, are more equal than the others. And those big fives that actually hold the seat in the Security Council, they are more equal than the rest of the world. That's the result of the World War II, and it's still in place. There's no back door into this, because like in Slovakia or in Czechia, if president vetoes something, there's a way around it, because the 2/3 you can vote over this, and you can sort of overvote president. UN doesn't have it. When the UN was established in '46, when they signed the charter, there's no back door to it. Those big five has absolute power of veto. So they will never allow anything that goes against their interests to pass through the Security Council. And UN, as such, cannot create a tribunal otherwise but through the Security Council. Now you think I'm bad-mouthing the UN. I'm not. UN is only as good as the member states. UN is not, they didn't come from the moon or from the Mars here. It's an organization which is budgeted by the member states and do exactly what the member states want them to do. When I was, for example, heading the office in New York, I had 17 investigators. And the budget for every single one of them have to be approved by the General Assembly. Every single, there's a budget code on it. And if they don't want to fund it, I will lose the investigator, right? They will cross the number from the list. From next year, no investigator, no budget for it. So the member states control very strictly how the money they spend on it are used. The Secretary General is not in a position to decide that he's going to do this or he's going to do that. He knows exactly what he's going to do because the member state tells him what to do, right? So for that reason, he cannot establish a tribunal but you know, he doesn't have the power for this. It has to be the Security Council. And those 5, any of the decision could be basically vetoed by one of those 5, and there's no tribunal. That's as bad as it is. I would like to have better news for you, but I don't have, and I'm going to paint it pink, you know? It's not pink, it's dark.
Vladimír, thank you very much for your lecture, for your sharings. We ran more than for 2 hours. Wow, that's wow, really. Also, thank you for.
You're gonna shoot me next time because when I start talking about the war crimes, you know, I cannot stop it.
Yeah.
It's a very passionate thing.
I think that if I can speak on behalf of the entire group, it was not very difficult actually to pay attention throughout 2 hours. We need to finish, unfortunately, now. If there will be more questions, we can somehow, process them later. I hope you, in a way, enjoyed, and thank you one more time.